Hello and welcome back to an episode I know that you've been waiting for from the universally beloved Deceptive Reality podcast.
Ooh.
You've been waiting a week to hear what's going on with our friend All Colored Sam.
All Color Sams.
And joining us is myself, Regular Color Nick, and Regular Color Bert.
Yeah.
Not all color like Sam.
Regular color, boys. Listen, that's me. You could not get a better description for me. And Nick, you're kind of, listen.
I'm ginger color.
I was going to say, you got more than just, you're multicolor yourself.
I'm all color Nick.
You're kind of all color Nick.
I'm a clown.
Well, listen, we're back. Freaking week 2 of our good old buddy Sam. The question becomes, do we believe that this is a good Sam? Do we believe this is a bad Sam? Do we think it's a UFO? Or do we think he's a demon? I haven't rolled out Troll yet.
I think we know. No, we can't roll out Troll for sure. We don't know what Troll looks like. I don't got a good description of a troll.
Yeah, I feel as though everything we learned about trolls is not true.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know a ton about him, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. You would be the man if anyone would know about something. I assume it'd be you, Nick. You kind of have all that folklore stuff down.
I do, but there's surprisingly little troll folklore that I'm aware of.
Well, I mean, listen. You just need to.
You can't believe everything goats tell you.
Well,
Billy goats tell you.
That's true. That's true. What says you at home? It's been a freaking week. Do you even remember this story? Did you forget that we're telling this story? I bet not. I bet you came back for it. Well, listen, a week's a long time. You're going to get confused. Look at this little thing that I pieced together for you. Check this out.
As they drew closer, they finally saw the figure in full detail, and what they saw defied all logic. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, its head seeming to sit directly on its shoulders with no neck to speak of. A pointed yellow hat crowned its head, adorned with a round black knob at the top and wooden antennae on either side. The hat merged seamlessly into the red collar of a green tunic, a stark contrast to the pallid white of its face. Its face was like nothing they had ever seen. Triangular markings served as eyes, a brown square formed its nose, and its yellow lips were unmoving. Round markings dotted its paper-white cheeks, and a fringe of crimson hair hung just above its eyes. Wooden slats protruded awkwardly from its sleeves and the cuffs of its white trousers, as if its limbs weren't flesh but something constructed. The blue gloves on its hands revealed only 3 fingers, and its bare white feet mirrored this unsettling design, each with 3 toes. On a March evening in 1972, a lone figure trudged across the damp sands of Compton Bay on the Isle of Wight. The air was cool and crisp, the kind of evening that chills the skin but soothes the mind. The man welcomed the solitude, walking further out as the low tide revealed glistening stretches of wet sand. He inhaled deeply, savoring the briny air, until a sudden sensation broke his peace, a shock of cold splashing against his ankle. It was only a wave, insignificant at first glance, but its icy touch sent a ripple of unease through him. The man glanced at the horizon, the dark sea stretching endlessly before him, he thought. It was time to head back. But just as he turned, another wave hit, higher this time, licking at his calves with more force than it should have. Another wave followed, and another. Each one grew more aggressive, more urgent. He scanned the water, now churning faster than seemed natural. This beach walk was familiar, almost routine, but something was wrong. His gut twisted with the instinctive certainty that whatever was happening wasn't just nature. When the next wave struck his knee, cold panic gripped him. The marsh was quiet except for the siren, which now seemed almost deafening. The children scanned the landscape, searching for its source, but nothing was there. The siren stopped. The abrupt silence hit them like a slap, its absence more unsettling than the sound itself. His gaze turned back to the water, scanning the endless blackness. And then he saw them. 2 yellow lights pierced the surface of the waves, glowing like twin suns in the dark abyss. They shimmered and shifted as the water distorted their form, but they were there, watching. The man froze, his mind racing to comprehend what he was seeing. Were they eyes? No, they couldn't be. Yet, they felt alive. The light seemed to study him, unblinking and deliberate as if weighing his very soul. Minutes passed like hours as the lights held their position, their unspoken menace filling the air. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they began to sink, fading into the murky depths below.
Do you want to see if they make it into this hut, just out of curiosity?
I would bet money they're going into the hut, or at least going to the door of the hut.
We're about to find out. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
The children hesitated at first, but followed Sam to his metallic hut, their steps tentative as they approached the strange structure. Sam gestured to a small flap on the side, no larger than a crawl space. He ducked and slipped through, motioning for the children to follow. With a shared glance, they crouched down and crawled inside, the metallic surface cold beneath their hands. Once inside, they found themselves in a space unlike anything they had imagined. The hut was split into 2 floors. The lower level was spacious enough for Sam to stand fully upright, his towering frame suddenly less confined. He removed his pointed yellow hat, revealing rounded white ears and a sparse patch of thinning brown hair atop his head. The walls of the lower level were lined with blue and green wallpaper, its patterns strangely vibrant against the dim light. Dials of various sizes were embedded in the walls, their purpose a mystery. Wooden furniture was scattered throughout, its aged surfaces out of place among the modern-looking electric heater humming softly in the corner. The upstairs, however, was different, cold and metallic, matching the structure's exterior. The children could see only glimpses of it, but the chill seemed to seep down into the air below. Sam began to talk, his voice low and muffled as always. He told the children he didn't just stay on the island. Sometimes he ventured to the mainland to gather berries from another camp he claimed to have. These berries, he explained, were his sole source of food, and he demonstrated his peculiar way of eating them. With deliberate precision, Sam picked up a berry and pressed it to one of his rounded ears. Then, with a sharp thrust of his head forward, the berry disappeared. Moments later, it reappeared, lodged in one of his triangular eyes. The children stared in stunned silence as he repeated the process, thrusting his head again until the berry finally dropped into his mouth, which he then opened to chew. The children watched, both horrified and fascinated, as Sam continued his explanation. He told them he drank water from the nearby brooks, but only after cleaning it. His calm demeanor contrasted starkly with his bizarre behavior, leaving the children trapped in a mixture of awe and unease. For the next half an hour, the children remained in Sam's strange home, their voices hushed as they talked. What they discussed during that time remains a mystery. When they finally said their goodbyes, they exited the same way they'd entered, crawling back through the small hatch. As they stepped away from the hut, a cold dread began to creep back over them. The further they moved from Sam's metallic dwelling, the more the reality of their encounter weighed on them. They glanced back only once, seeing the structure still standing ominously in the marsh, with no sign of Sam following them. By the time they reached the edge of the golf course, the unease had turned to outright fear. Without a word, they broke into a run, their footsteps pounding against the damp ground as they raced back to the lake where they had played earlier. When they finally found 2 adults near the lake, the words spilled out of them in a rush of excitement and terror. But the men only laughed, brushing off their story as a childish prank. "Stop messing around," one of them said, waving them off. "Go on home." The children's excitement gave way to shame under the weight of the adults' mockery. Even at their young age, they understood how unbelievable their story sounded. They made an unspoken pact, Faye and her friend, to keep what they had seen to themselves. And they did. For 3 weeks, neither child breathed a word of the strange figure in the marsh or his metallic hut. But the story didn't end there.
Another cliffhanger upon cliffhanger.
It's what I do, Nick.
I guess so. Well, that I don't know what to think of that whole berry trick there. That's weird.
Well, if you think about it, towards the beginning, when he first started talking to him, his lips never moved.
Right.
So my guess is more than likely he couldn't put it in his lips because his lips possibly didn't open all the way for it to go in.
Yeah, because he had to use that microphone thing that sort of beamed words into their head, kind of.
Yes.
Or it felt like that's what happened.
Correct.
Yeah. But he is eating, so he must be some kind of living entity, I guess. Although, why is that his only source of food? So, see, this is just bringing up more questions.
Yes. This is half the fun, Nick. Is trying to decipher this story. I think we've
got more. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this sort of lends more, this past one lends more evidence to the extra dimensional space, because he went in through a tiny hole in this thing that, from the pictures, didn't appear to be that big. It turns out to be 2 stories, and he can stand up comfortably 7 feet tall on just the bottom story
with his hat on. So if he's 7 foot,
right,
with his hat. Now,
right.
Now this sounds similar to a story that we've told before when it comes to spatial recognition like this. Do you remember what story that was?
I do not.
Bob Lazar, when he went inside the UFO.
Oh, yeah.
He said that it was very spacious.
Yeah.
It was significant.
How do you figure that works?
I think it's part of that extra dimensional plane. I think that we're very limited versus when you extend in whatever. It's like, here's a great example. And, I typically don't get religious with it, but people say, well, the Bible says that there's these layers and layers of streets of gold and everyone has a mansion. Right. And no one could, it'd be impossible. And I'm like, well, it's possible, not necessarily on Earth, but in a non-dimensional plane, it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't know the properties of the afterlife.
No, we have zero clue. But then the question becomes...
And I mean, it's not beyond comprehension either, though. So.
No, but I think that if you're a purebred skeptic, it's hard for you to go, well, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. They're always looking at it through that very shallow lens, and they go, that's impossible. Well, it's impossible because in our dimensional plane, yeah, but we can't even prove the other dimensional plane. Well, then we'll never believe anything ever said.
Right. There's a lot of things we can't absolutely prove, but we know from the effects of it that it is likely true.
Radiation. We didn't believe radiation was a thing until people started falling over dead from radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
I found this very interesting story, not to go completely off the subject, but it was about radiation, and it kind of goes into this. This is before we really had a great understanding of radiation in certain areas.
Right.
This guy had went to this old factory where they had left a nuclear energy cell. It was like a machine that used nuclear power.
Right.
They just left this machine there. And these people went in and scavenged it. Well, they found this very interesting thing that had glass, and he could look in there and he saw it, and he broke the glass and he started taking all the stuff out of it. And he was like, there was this powder. So he took it and then he gave it to some friends, and he showed these kids, and they were painting their skin with it and stuff. Well, all these people started getting like really sick.
Yeah.
They go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you just caught it was like pneumonia or something, like a virus or something.
Ooh, boy, was he wrong.
Yeah, he was way wrong. And it was funny because they started going back, and then people started getting sicker and sicker, and it didn't matter what happened. Like, things was getting worse and worse. And finally, this woman's like, ever since we've gotten this material in this town, so she collects all of it that she had in her house, and she takes it to the doctor's office and goes, this is what I think caused it. So then the doctor's sitting there, and he goes, no, that definitely isn't what caused it. That's a superstition. I think because this is new in your house and then you got sick, that's why.
Right.
After that, he took it outside to put it in like contamination because he didn't know what it was. Then he started getting sick, and he's like, oh, wait a second.
Oh, it was that stuff.
So finally, they all ended up going to the doctor, like this mass place. They started quarantining them all off. And what they found out was that was some form of nuclear fusion that was occurring, and they was putting it on their skin and stuff. So it just goes to show that and this was recently, like this wasn't, 200 years ago. Like this has been maybe 60, 70 years ago.
Right.
But here's a town that doesn't know a whole lot. And you've got doctors, people who are professionals that's supposed to have all this knowledge that is completely going, your husband got this scrap metal. That's not what it is. And that's just now. That's within the last 100 years. Yeah. So
yeah, I would have expected them to be a little smarter about that.
See, but like, I feel like if that happened right now, in some major city, they would first off be like, no, it's definitely not that, at least for a while, until multiple people started checking in. And it just goes to show, just because you can't see something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And that's the one thing that I keep going back to. Radiation is like one of the biggest arguments that I have. How many hundreds of years have we potentially died from some form of radiation sickness and poisoning? And people just thought it was misfortune or something of that equivalent, or like those poor ladies that was licking licking the end of their brushes when they was painting that radium on those watch hands.
Yes.
I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're exposed to deadly radiation every day.
Correct.
In That's multiple all the places. Sun is.
Yeah, but think about it. We put some things into our own homes. Like our cell phones emit radiation. But what they say is, well, it's such small radiation, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Dishes used to be radioactive that was enough to set off a Geiger counter.
Yeah.
And some people still have those. Sometimes they find them in people's homes.
They collect them. A lot of people collect them. They've got shrines to them. Because you can take a black light and you can see the green uranium inside of them.
Yeah, I don't want any of that business near me.
I don't either, but you would be surprised how expensive that stuff is. People buys them. And people go to thrift stores specifically looking for them with black lights to resell.
Yeah, I know. Makes me not want to go to those.
Nick's like, I ain't going to them no more.
I ain't going to thrift stores. I don't really anyway. So I go to a thrift store once a year, Halloween.
You know what's funny is my parents are going to be mad that I told this story. They used to tell me all the time.
Turn off now.
Yeah, exactly. Turn off, Mom, Dad. They used to tell me, you go to the thrift store, you can find some interesting stuff. I said, I'll never go to a thrift store ever. I'm beyond, that's gross. And then I started a business when I lost my job. This was, 10 years back.
Oh my God. Was it a thrift store?
No. I've always been in some form of finance, always.
Right.
But I had heard that you can do this reselling stuff.
And
I'm like, maybe I can make money doing this. So I started going to thrift stores to buy things to then resell. And I fell in love with thrift stores. I'm like, I found some of the craziest, coolest things that I've ever seen. But what's interesting is like a great example. Like I found this old Sanyo radio, like the old one, like the 8-band radio.
Yeah.
I looked at it. I couldn't find another sold unit of this radio. And I'm like, that's crazy. But it was $8. And I'm like, shoot, I could probably sell this thing for $15, make a little bit of profit. I took it back home. I took pictures of it and everything. And then finally I found one. The last one sold for $160.
Ooh, nice.
And I spent $8 plus tax. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm just going to put $160 on this thing and just see what happens.
Right.
So I put the $160 on it. And this guy hit me up every single week. He's like, you're basing on that last sold. Nobody wants this radio anymore. I'll give you $40 for it.
One of these guys.
One of those guys. And I said, nah, I appreciate it. And he goes, well, how long are you going to sit on it for? Like, you don't want to keep sitting on this big old radio. And I'm like, I'm fine with it. So another week go by and he go, listen, I'll give you 45 and I shouldn't even give you that. And I'm like, no, I'll hold on to it. He did this for like a month.
Right.
And I think he got up to like $55 or something. Some guy came in, sight unseen, bought it for $125.
Nice.
And then the guy emailed me after it was sold, yelling. He was mad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was eBay. And he was so mad. He said, I can't believe you sold that. You ripped someone off for $120 and blah, blah, blah.
Whatever.
But here's the crazy thing. So, eBay, it has the thing where you leave a review and stuff. This guy said that, and I didn't know this guy taught me in the comments. He's like, I'm so excited to have bought this. It does work. Gave me 5 stars. He goes, I got a really good deal on these because it was only made in Japan for these amount of years. He said, I had one when I was in Japan in the army and I couldn't bring it back. He said, I've been looking for this. He goes, these are so rare, you cannot find them. And I'm like, that's why they're worth money.
Yeah. That reminds me of, I've been searching for something that I had in the past for ages that you can't get anymore. It's the Imperial rubber Halloween skeleton, Boney Benny, the Weight Watcher. I lugged one of those around like a doll when I was a kid all the time. Then I lost him when I shot him out of a potato cannon, and I've been trying to buy one ever since.
You know what the best part is? My parents called me this week, or I called them this week.
Yeah.
And they was laughing because they was like, poor Nick, he shot that thing out of that potato can.
Oh, I've told this before. Dang.
You just recently told it. And they were so upset about it. They're like, man, I hope he can find one. I'm like, man.
Me too. Thanks for sympathizing with me. I'm sorry to bring this up again.
No.
I really do think about it a lot, and I will have one.
How big was it, Nick? Was it really big?
That was a bit that tall.
Oh, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And you shot that out of a potato can and couldn't find it?
Yeah, I had a string attached to him, and I did it a few times, and he came back every time. But not the last time.
Man, that's
you know what his name was?
Mm-mm.
Did I say what his name was?
I don't think
Skelly.
So. Skelly, that's a great name. All you needed was a molder.
Yeah. I will find him again. I know. I will. I occasionally find them on eBay, but they sell right before I get there. Eventually, I'm going to have it, and that's all that's going to be on my Instagram is pictures of that skeleton for like 5 years.
All you out there in the wide world web, www. What's the name of this thing, Nick?
It's an Imperial toy company rubber skeleton called Boney Benny, the Weight Watcher.
You gotta help Nick find this thing. It's important.
Yes, please send me a link. I'll buy it.
Nick is looking for this thing, and we gotta make sure.
Yeah,
we gotta make sure he gets it back. Like, this is empirical that he gets this thing back.
Yeah, if you find the original one,
extra points. Extra points.
Yeah,
if
he's
it's
in the woods. He's in the woods near my old house. So.
Man. That's crazy.
If I wouldn't go to jail, I'd be like going through that wood, because rubber lasts forever, don't it? I'd be going through the woods looking for that thing.
The crazy part is you probably shot it and some animal probably stole it and ran with it. Took it in a hole somewhere.
Horrible animals.
Wouldn't it be crazy if you found one?
I will find one eventually. I will.
You will. That makes sense.
I will. I always succeed when I really put my heart into something. So sometimes I will find it.
You just got to put your heart into it, Nick. I believe you'll have one.
That's right.
I bet you'll have one in 2025.
I will. And this is the year coming up. This is what's going to happen.
That's what I'm saying. Right around the corner.
Yep. It's going to happen. But anyway, I've taken us way off that.
Not necessarily. We don't know what this thing is yet, Nick.
It's an Imperial skeleton. Imperial toy company skeleton.
It could be.
But it didn't do anything to these kids.
No, but not yet.
Oh, wow.
Because it said the story continues. That's what it said. We don't know.
It does.
Nick.
That's right. One other part. So you know how the kids were leaving, and as all of a sudden the fear started to creep back into them. Do you ever remember being a kid where something happened and you don't react to it right away?
Oh, yeah.
And your back's to it and you're starting to go away and then the fear starts creeping up on you and then you bolt. I remember that as a kid happening a few times.
Yeah, I called that school.
So I know what they were going through. School?
Yeah. Every time I left it, it kind of gave me the icky, scared feeling.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. They talked about this hut. They said that one of the fascinating things is he squatted down and crawled inside of it.
Right. That's a weird design.
Very weird design. And it makes me wonder, because if you look at the original illustration I sent you, and those of you at home, obviously I'll put it back up so you guys see what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It looks just like it would be a shed that someone would be able to stand. Like if he's 7 foot tall, that's probably how tall that entire structure is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's the fence for scale.
Right.
And that door is probably only like 3 feet tall tops.
I wouldn't even think that's 3 foot. I would think almost 3 foot, maybe 2 foot and some change, maybe. Because if you lined 3 of those up, it would still not be to the top, and that'd be 9 foot if it was 3 foot. So you got to figure if it's 2.5, 2.5, 5. 7.5 with a little bit of space. So that's probably about right. 3 of those would probably be the equivalent of regular door, probably. So a little bit over like 7 foot, probably 7.5 foot. Yeah.
Right. So like he was able to squat down into that. That must have been pretty horrifying to look at.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was 7 foot, not including the cap.
Yeah.
So he must have limboed in there, right?
Not only that,
or something.
Well, he's probably crawling on all fours. I mean, hopefully it didn't look like that Mike Tyson, Jake Paul when he was walking around the arena and then got to see them cheeks.
Yeah. I had wondered if you saw that fight or not.
Oh, yeah. Of course I did, Nick. Requirement.
Yeah.
I grew up.
We went real quiet in the last match.
Yeah. It was kind of sad to watch. It was hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was probably like that, man. His old Sam probably had his cheeks out there in the wind trying to get in that thing. Because you got to figure
he
you're
must
7
almost
foot.
Folded himself.
He'd almost have to. Like he would have had to squat it all the way down. And, I don't even know that he doesn't make logical sense.
No. He must have crawled though. He couldn't have just squatted because
there's no way.
Like I can't see any way like that. It's probably not even as tall as his knees were.
No, there's no way. Yeah,
on a 7 foot tall person.
He would have had to have crawled out. Yeah. But you got to remember this is being told by a 7-year-old kid too. Yeah.
Like I'm sure it's not 100% accurate. Squatting down could mean anything for them.
Could mean anything. Yeah.
Yeah. But he crawled in there and it's weird that the door was built that way. Or going back to the forest episode with the aliens and the robots that you told us before, those doors, maybe they're just about the right height for little people, but not for their robots.
That's true.
Yeah. Because, like, again, maybe this thing crashed and most of the occupants were killed and only one of the robots remained.
He did lose a companion that did not look like him.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of like him, but not exactly. It's kind of like, have you seen those robots that Tesla has out now?
Yeah. Yeah. They're pretty cool, but also partially a scam, I think, right now.
How's that?
I don't think, I think it came out that they weren't actually talking themselves at the event that they were debuted at.
Did you see iSpeed has one?
Oh, he's got one now?
Yeah.
Wait, is that the one that destroyed his TV?
Destroyed his TV. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know much about that. I know the event they premiered him at, I don't think they were quite ready, so they had people talking through them remotely.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. They caught some people because they were kind of not all doing a great job.
Whoops.
Yeah, but I mean, still, just to have robots move around like that and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's something. That wasn't, I don't think that could have been remote controlled.
Well, that thing with iSpeed, if you watch that robot that he has, I don't, come to think of it, I don't know that I've heard it speak.
I don't know. I'll have to look in that later. It might be a different kind. It might not have been one of the Tesla ones.
It could be. I know that it's on wheels. Yeah. It's got like the 2 wheels on the side and 1 little wheel on the back.
Oh, I thought the Tesla ones were walking on their own. They were walking,
yeah. So I didn't know if they had different models of it or something.
Yeah, I bet this is from another company because anytime someone does something, someone else is right behind.
Well, I watched this video that had iSpeed and Snoop Dogg called him. And Snoop Dogg's like, "What's up, cuz? Hey, you got that? I heard you had that robot." And iSpeed's like, "Yeah, man, I got one. Hold on. Let me show him to you. I'm going to show him." And then he goes and gets a robot, and the robot comes up and he goes, "Yeah, me and the robot was just jamming to you." And he's like, "Oh, he was jamming me, cuz? I need to get my hands on one of them." And the robot's sitting there kind of swinging back and forth. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, listen, that's kind of cool."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
I'll tell you, you say it was Snoop Dogg was there?
Yeah, Snoop Dogg. It was Snoop Dogg. He was on the phone with iSpeed. Yeah.
Man, anything he attaches himself is extra cool.
Snoop Dogg
everything.
Everyone's uncle.
He's the definition of cool.
Yeah. He's like everyone's
uncle. He is like, yeah. But we also have to remember in his past, he was dangerous. That makes him extra.
Yeah. He's the crazy uncle.
Yeah. That's what I aspire to be.
Exactly. Sometimes you got to be the cool unc, man. That's it.
Yeah. But I'm kind of leaning towards this thing's a robot that was working on a alien craft that crashed and all the other occupants were destroyed.
It could be. It definitely could be.
And maybe he found the only thing that he could find that is a compatible fuel source to what they would have given him on the ship.
That could be too. It's definitely one of those things that makes you scratch your head and go, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm still at that stage, but I'm trying to piece things together best I can.
Well, you have to remember.
Yeah, but I still don't know how he relates to the octopus.
I mean, we might come around full circle, Nick. We don't know.
Maybe.
The other thing that I'll say is there was, if you remember correctly, in the narration, the walls of the lower level was lined with blue and green wallpaper. Its pattern strangely vibrant against the dim light. And then it said, dials of various sizes were embedded in the walls.
Yeah. If that doesn't scream spaceship, I don't know what does. Although I don't expect wallpaper sometimes, but they could.
But here's the thing.
Have wallpaper.
What if, and this is just me playing a game of what if.
Yeah. Which is what we're doing here anyway.
Correct. Yeah. We're doggone professional podcast company, What if this space shuttle crashed on Earth?
Right.
It killed all the occupants.
Yep. I'm down with this.
This thing is like a marionette, right? It's not great on its feet. It kind of stumbles around. It can't fly it back.
No. If you remember earlier, it fumbled the thing it was carrying, and it's not super adept at that stuff.
Yeah. So you figure if it's incapable of doing any of that, now there's old wooden furniture inside. So it's now saying, this is now my home. If it's a robot and it's studied.
Yep.
Who's to say it didn't go to some spots, maybe steal some furniture?
Oh, man. You know how it had wooden slats coming out its arm and stuff like that? It was probably damaged in the crash and had to prop itself up with stuff that it found.
It could have been.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now it's starting to click a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. I think this is pretty good alignment with that kind of thing. Plus, if it is like a robot that worked for aliens, what's the first thing? Like when we talk about making robots, what's one of the first rules as Asimov's rules is you can't harm anyone.
Don't kill us.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that rule applies to people that exist on this earth too.
Yeah.
And they're like, if someone attacked me, I wouldn't fight back. I can't.
Right.
Because you have one of the 3 rules of robotics.
Right. But think about it. This is something interesting that he also said. And let me make sure I don't screw this up.
Yeah.
Sam began to talk, his voice low and muffled as always. He told the children he didn't just stay on the island. Sometimes he ventured to the mainland to gather berries from another camp that he claimed to have.
I wonder if it was like this one.
Well, here's the thing. What if these things are extra dimensional?
Yeah.
They crash. But if you remember, those kids was walking and there was a point where they hit that, what I would call an extra dimensional plane.
Right.
And now they're in that dimension, whatever that dimension is. Now, when they're walking back, it's kind of like when you go to a different area. And let's say it's like, here's a great example. Like when I go to the beach, I've got small ear canals. So after a while, my ears adjust to North Carolina, right? Which is where I go to vacation. When I'm coming back, my ears feel very strained when I'm going back.
Right.
They've been in this dimension for a while now. We don't actually know how long they've been there. Now, as they're starting to get closer and closer to that line, they see it as they're getting further and further away from the hut. In my opinion, they're getting closer and closer to their dimensional plane now.
Yeah. That would make sense.
Maybe that's what's causing this irrational fear that they're starting to have.
Maybe, well, like you mentioned with your ear canals and stuff, maybe that's the sound.
Could be.
Like that's...
Because when that happens, we also hear noises when we're... Yeah, a lot of times it's echoed or muffled or all these different things.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's different pressure differences can cause, all of the things you hear is just vibrations of your eardrum.
Right.
Like if there were weird vibration passing through a veil of some sort, that could affect your hearing. And I mean, that would also explain the beach, that man was walking on the beach and he passed into an area where this was also happening.
Right.
Interesting.
It's very interesting.
A lot to think about there.
A lot to think about. Very small section.
Yeah, there's always stuff that we can relate to other videos that we've done and other stories that we've done.
Right.
And there's got to be some kernel of truth amongst these where they share so much. Because it can't just be people have heard each story so they all copy it. I think there's something going on.
Probably. Now, what that is, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
We'll unlock it eventually.
Yeah, it might just take a few years.
Another interesting thing that I found when I was looking at this, where was it at? So obviously, I would assume that if they're in the basic area with this thing, they would feel comfortable. But it said, the children stared in stunning silence as he repeated the process with the berries. Right. But it said that as the children watched, both horrified and fascinated, as Sam continued his explanation, he told them that he drank water from nearby brooks only after cleaning it.
Right.
So much like what we was talking about earlier with War of the Worlds, he's making sure
get the impurities out.
Yeah, he's making sure he's getting whatever out of there. So again, he has to have some type of a biome body system of some sort.
Yeah. So there's got to be at least some kind of biological part, even if it's only bits and pieces.
Right. There's some, I would almost call it like RoboCop.
Yeah. Like cyborg kind of thing.
Yeah. For sure.
Which is where I think we're going, by the way. I think that's where we're kind of like that now, because we're never detached from our cell phones and stuff.
Well, not only that, but how many times are we creating body parts now that are not really us? They're not ours.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing pacemakers forever.
Right.
We've been doing organ transplants for a while, which that's not necessarily mechanical, but it is parts that aren't us.
No, but what if they could create a heart that just does the pumping of the oxygen?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that they can't invent something like that at this point.
Maybe they do, and we're just not aware of it.
Which could be. Listen, this is going to shock everyone at home. I'm sorry. We are not, Nick and I are not medical doctors.
I know. It's I hate to let y'all down.
I know you've thought this since day one.
Yeah, for sure. Detectives, doctors, maybe adventurers.
Absolutely.
You know, all these things. Just not doctors.
Just not
That's
doctors. Doctors, listen, we've played doctors in video games. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like doctors.
Yeah. But we're not doctors in the way that you can get in trouble for impersonating.
Exactly. Never that.
Never that.
Except for that one time in Guam. But listen, it was a one-time thing. Okay.
It's all right. Don't read into that.
But it says, for the next half an hour, the children remained in Sam's strange house, their voices hushed as they talked.
Yeah.
Why was their voices
all their
hushed?
voices hushed?
Yes.
Yeah, all their voices were hushed.
Isn't that odd?
That is odd.
It doesn't make sense.
That is odd.
Why would your voice be hushed? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, why would Sam's voice be hushed?
Right.
Maybe that's just another aspect or another reality of the dimension they're in.
Right.
That it doesn't work the same way there.
Or their ears haven't technically, it's still processing.
Oh, that's true. It might not have been hushed because, you know, if you can't hear well, you can't tell if you're yelling or not.
Well, and these kids said that he was talking with a muffled voice. What if it's not muffled? It's their hearing has an issue.
That, you know what? That makes a lot more sense, I think.
Yes.
Otherwise, why? But I wonder, and you probably don't know this, but when he's talking, is he using that microphone every time, or was that just
that was a one-time thing? And then after that, they said that it's almost like it was telepathic.
Yeah, and that's when they started to calm down. I wonder if it was a tool for that kind of thing.
Could
like
be.
Almost like a sonic weapon kind of.
Could be.
Man, there's so much, you know, what if.
There's so much.
I can see how some people make a career just doing what if and getting people to.
Right.
Because it's easy to relate things. We're pattern seeking creatures.
Right.
So, I mean, all of this could be and likely is wrong, but I'm in my head, I'm like, yeah, this could be.
Absolutely. But that's how we science things ourselves. We have to look at, again, the patterns and go, where's the similarities? Like, how many times do we go, remember on this episode, there was this, and this?
Exactly.
But those similarities, they all connect.
Right.
Now,
weird world.
They get out of this spot. They start running. They come to the first two people and they're like, kids, go away. Stop playing these games. That's frivolous. Stop
being
it.
silly.
Being silly.
I mean, I would be like, I'd be humoring them, but in my head, I'd be like, that didn't happen.
Yes.
I'd just be like, oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. But in England, you know, they probably had a little bit of wah.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm not dealing with this with a wah.
Yeah.
You know? So they made a pact that they would never talk about it again.
Right. So a children's pact lasts about a week and a half.
You would think that.
Okay.
Now, are you curious to see what happens?
I am. I want to see if she tells her dad.
Well,
we know she does.
There's only one way to find out.
Let's find out.
On June 2nd, 1973, Faye's father, referred to only as Mr. Y in all accounts, was growing increasingly concerned. Over the past few weeks, his daughter's demeanor had changed. She had grown quiet, distracted, as though something weighed heavily on her young mind. Whenever he pressed her about it, she would brush it off with vague excuses, but her unease lingered, gnawing at him. That day, something shifted. Perhaps it was her father's persistence, or perhaps Faye could no longer keep her secret to herself. Whatever the reason, she finally sat down and told him the story that had haunted her for weeks, the strange events in the marsh, the metallic hut, and the figure they had come to know as Sam. As she recounted the tale, her father's initial reaction was laughter. "Don't be silly," he said, dismissing her story as nothing more than an overactive imagination. But his amusement quickly faded when he saw the tears welling in his daughter's eyes. She wasn't just telling a fanciful tale. This was something that had genuinely frightened her, something that still frightened her. The level of detail she provided unsettled him. It was so vivid, so strange, and so far beyond what a child of her age could invent. The colors of the hut's wallpaper, the odd texture of Sam's skin, the peculiar way he ate berries. It was all too specific, Faye's distress as she recounted the experience only deepened his unease. Still skeptical but unable to ignore his daughter's evident fear, Mr. Y decided to investigate. He began by speaking with the boy who had been with her that day. The boy was reluctant to talk, his eyes darting nervously as Mr. Y questioned him. But eventually the boy confirmed Faye's story. He too had met the strange figure in the field. He backed up most of her account, though his hesitation suggested he wished he hadn't. Convinced that something had happened, though not necessarily the story his daughter had told, Mr. Y went to the site himself. He walked along the brook, searching for any sign of the metallic hut, but the field was empty. The marsh was just a marsh. There was no structure, no flap, no sign of Sam or anything else out of the ordinary. Yet Faye's story wouldn't leave him. He had her retell it multiple times, each time writing down every detail. Her version of events never changed, and the boy's corroboration only added to his unease. The more he thought about it, the more he felt there was something there, some truth buried in the strangeness. Desperate for answers, Mr. Y reached out to Bufora, the British UFO Research Association. He submitted his notes, detailing every aspect of the children's accounts. He requested complete anonymity for himself and the children, wanting no attention or notoriety from the story. He simply wanted someone, anyone, to investigate, to tell him that he wasn't losing his mind. The investigator who took the case published the events in a Bufora journal, chronicling them in unsettling detail. But the question lingered. Why had Mr. Y turned to UFO investigators for a story that sounded more like folklore than extraterrestrial activity? To understand his reasoning, one must look back 3 years to the start of Mr. Y's own encounters.
Things are heating up, Nick.
They sure are. They sure are. I'm surprised that at first he was like, don't be silly. Like, he knew something was bothering her for ages. Like,
right.
Especially with his own experiences. Why would that be his go-to?
I think it was a case of how do you, especially when it's kids, right? Because kids have been known to be very fanciful.
Imaginative.
Very imaginative, you know? And I think that's exactly what ended up happening. I think that it wasn't until she started kind of tearing up and he could see, oh wait, like this is really getting to her, that, you know, we're not accepting this.
Right.
That he's like, okay, there must clearly be something here.
Yeah. And I wonder if he should have, like, when he went to investigate, if he should have took kids with him.
I mean, if your daughter told you that tale, would you want to take him?
Oh, I guess that's where I'm probably irresponsible, because I would have been like, I'd be like, take me to this swamp house, child.
Take me there. I need to know what's going on. Yeah, Nick, maybe for parenting, maybe not. Maybe
no, I'm not going to be a good parent. Also, don't make me babysit your kids either. I don't want that.
I mean, that's smart.
Because, I would have took her. I would like, take me to this swamp, man. It's no fair that you got to see an alien and I don't.
Yeah. You know, but again, it's interesting because now he's almost taken the approach of, okay, we're going to find this thing regardless.
Right.
And now he's going out and actually trying to find where's this thing at? What's going on with it? Can I journalize? And he's writing everything down. Yeah. So if anyone's going to try to find, it's going to be him. He's going to try to figure this out, piece it together. But he finally went to the journal and he's like, listen, I can't do this. It's impossible.
I need some help.
I need a little bit of help. I'm kind of stuck. I'm stuck like Chuck, as some would say.
Well, yeah. Yeah, because he couldn't pass into that dimensional space that time.
Correct.
It could have been there and he just wouldn't have seen it.
Correct. And therein lies the problem. Again, it goes back to the extra dimensional plane. I just don't think that he's capable of that extra dimensional plane.
But he was 3 years previous, though. That's the kind of weird thing.
So he heard the sound and he saw the lights.
Right. But to me, that was kind of like he did pass into that.
Yes.
So,
or at
but
least
maybe
it was passing into his.
right.
But
Maybe that they only allow us sometimes to do this.
But where did he come up with that sound from?
That he had heard.
Mm-hmm. Well, he saw the lights too. It all was connected.
Yeah. I don't remember what he said that he thought it was.
It was in the water. He didn't know what it was.
Right.
Where do we always say we think the UFOs are?
Extra dimensional or the ocean.
Or the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, if you think back to the Shag Harbor incident, a lot of that took place underwater.
Right.
And when new ones showed up, they came underwater, not from the skies.
Absolutely. Now, a little treat for you, Nick. This will take you down memory lane. In your Discord, I just sent you the PDF of the Befora journal with that actual case in it.
Oh, really?
Yep. Came out January February 1978.
It's got a picture of him on there.
Yes.
Oh, that is wild.
I thought you would like that.
Oh, yeah. I cannot wait to read this. I'm not going to do it while we're on air here, but this is...
So a big part of what I wrote was based on what's in this journal. And the journal has everything from the hat to the site to the pictures that I've shown you thus far. But then it goes into other things that applies. But it was so fascinating. I'm like, Nick has to see this.
Yeah, there's no way you were going to be able to get AI to make that.
No.
Like that thing defies even like you couldn't describe that to a human and have someone draw it accurately. Correct. I don't think
it's impossible.
Yeah, but I can see why it went with the clown kind of thing. That's probably the closest relatable thing we have to it.
And the town folks called it a clown.
Yeah. Well, let me look at that picture right now.
Yep.
And I'm not going to use the words that they used in this, but I'm going to kind of describe it to you. And you tell me, if you hadn't heard this, what it sounds.
Yep.
Like, okay. So we have a pointed hat with the pom-pom on the top. A face that has two goofy looking eyes with triangles above them, or the triangles are the eyes and two little rosy cheeks and a square little piggy nose and a weird little mouth. And he's got a big collar on a puffy shirt that's all kinds of colors. And it's got triangles and circles and rectangles. And then he's got funny colored pants with frills on the bottom. Like, what did I just describe?
Rosie O'Donnell.
Like a clown. Or Rosie O'Donnell. But if you were drawing that, you'd probably have drawn a clown.
Clown, yeah, 100%. That would have been a clown.
Yeah.
The Rosie O'Donnell is just funny for anyone that doesn't know, because, that's what, like, if it was back, 2016, it'd been like, I only said about Rosie O'Donnell one time. Just a little joke for an inside joke. But yeah, I definitely would have drawn a clown 100%. I wouldn't have thought twice about it.
Yeah, it's amazing that they were able to get that picture out of the kids. So they must have talked to him for a very long time.
Yes.
To get that out of them.
Now, one thing that's super important for the last segment when we go into it.
Yeah.
You're going to remember all these things that we talked about with this clown, quote unquote.
Are we on the last segment already?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Good. But I'm saying once we get there, remember this moment?
Yeah.
Because
I will remember.
A big part of this will come up again.
Okay. Like what we were just talking about?
In another unrelated case.
In another unrelated case?
Yes.
Oh, that's what. Oh, man. When I was describing that, I should have said, and he has blue gloves on.
Blue gloves on, yeah.
Like, yeah, definite clown.
Now, what's interesting is, like, that is part 6. We've got 8 total sections. So we technically have 2 more. The next section goes into a little bit more about what happens with the father and some of what he dealt with and the correlation. And then 8 is literally just me closing down the entire story and then adding another story that is very similar,
Okay.
but not connected.
So is he going to get some help in this next segment?
I can't say.
Oh, okay. So we don't know, but he's trying to get help because he submitted it to this journal.
Let's just say he goes into more of his story, which makes more sense, and then other information that was provided.
Okay. So that's what
So what I did was at the very beginning, I gave a teaser of, hey, this kind of stuff's happening. And coincidentally, his daughter has something a year later. But you got to remember, when his stuff happened, he didn't tell anybody about his experience either.
Right. You sort of insinuated that it wasn't his only experience either. That other weird stuff had happened too.
Maybe, perhaps.
Maybe. Oh, here you go, Shyamalan again.
Yo, M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the end, I think this was terrifying for these kids. Now they're being interrogated by the father, which for the daughter, it would probably be not that bad. But for the other kid, he's probably like, oh my God, what have I done?
Correct.
Like, this scary dad is coming to grill me over this thing that I don't know what it is.
Correct. So you don't know what's going on. And now you have people that's coming to you like, we need to know what this is. They're 7. Yeah. So they're already limited in their thought process. Like they've not experienced a lot of life.
Yeah.
So
and she was more receptive to it than the boy was.
Right. Yeah.
So I wonder if that has anything to do with what her father's experienced. Like if there's something in this family that causes, an abnormal amount of things to happen.
Right.
So,
but then it goes back to, we talked about some of those cases that we saw early on.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of stuff that was going on in some of those areas. When you look at a timeline
that's true.
Of the events, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't cover. Like we can't cover everything. And, we try to keep these podcasts between an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes, and especially on a 2-parter. I've in essence got 2 hours and 40 minutes, maybe 3 hours. I don't like going over 3 hours in 2 parts. But there's a lot of things that I didn't even cover.
Yeah, it's hard to wrangle it in sometimes, especially on these, like, you don't want to go 4 hours on something that great.
Correct.
But I don't know if we're any closer to solving this or not. I think we've got a good theory on the go.
Well, this next segment, there's people that correlate things, is how we'll put it, with something else that we've touched on multiple times. Should I say they
in this episode or in the past?
In the past.
Okay.
On different episodes. In fact, just recently, they accused someone of being associated with someone else that we may have talked about, especially on the arcade episode.
Oh, the Men in Black government.
I didn't say
kind of thing.
I didn't say it.
Oh, you didn't say it. You insinuated it. You dropped a little trail of candies.
I didn't insinuate nothing. I just said it was similar to one, and it was in an arcade episode. That's all I said.
Well, I remember Polybius very well because I wrote that and I was there at the time we discussed it.
I mean,
so
you made that assumption. I didn't make it.
Oh, that's true. I'm going to stick with it, though, as if you had made it.
Out of curiosity, do you want to hear the next segment? See if we can pull anything out of that.
I do. What are you going to do one day if I'm like, nah, I'm done?
I'll just be like, well, this episode done, folks. Hopefully be sure to like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends.
That will never happen because I'm always curious and I love these stories. But I'm just being silly. Listen, I do want to hear this.
If we did not do that on that Bigfoot episode, I don't foresee an episode where that'll happen.
Right. That was the biggest piece of garbage that we ever laid into the earth. Gave birth to a monstrosity.
It was a pretty tough one. But let's see.
Don't watch that one.
Maybe, watch that one still and tell us in the comments down below. But let's see if this segment does anything for us. Let's go.
Let's clear some stuff up.
On the dark evening of Tuesday, October 20th, 1970, Mr. Y found himself driving alone to a friend's house, the crisp air of autumn settling heavily over the quiet roads. The village of Brading was nearly silent, its residents already tucked away in their homes. As he left the village behind, his headlights illuminated the winding country road ahead. That's when he saw it. A large object loomed in the sky to his right, hovering silently over the fields. Its sheer size was enough to make Mr. Y pull his car to the side of the road. He stared in disbelief. 7 glowing lights were fixed to the underside of the craft, each one a perfectly spherical orb, radiating hues of red, turquoise, and white. They shimmered like giant cherries in the dark sky, vivid and hypnotic. The strangest part? There was no sound. Not the faintest hum or buzz, just an oppressive silence. Intrigued and uneasy, Mr. Y turned the engine back on and began to drive slowly down the road, his eyes fixed on the craft. To his shock, it moved with him, keeping perfect pace with his car. It was as if the object was observing him, deliberately mirroring his movements. His pulse quickened as the craft suddenly veered across the road, cutting behind his vehicle about 300 feet away. He stopped again, stepping out into the chill night air, and watched as the object hovered over a nearby field. It appeared smaller now, though he couldn't be sure if it had shrunk or if the dimming of 3 of its lights had created that illusion. Gripping his flashlight, he pointed it toward the object, but the beam fell short, unable to pierce the darkness. The craft continued its erratic movement, shifting back and forth as though indecisive. After some time, Mr. Y returned to his car, shaken but determined to carry on to his friend's house. Yet as he drove, the glowing red lights remained visible in his rearview mirror, trailing him like a predator stalking its prey. When he finally reached his destination, he hurried inside and recounted the encounter to his friend. The pair decided to investigate, stepping outside into the cool night. There, in the distance, the lights still hovered. They drifted lazily above the treetops, disappearing behind the branches only to re-emerge moments later, as if playing some eerie game of hide-and-seek. The 2 men watched in silence, the night feeling heavier with each passing second. When Mr. Y eventually left for home, the lights followed briefly before vanishing into the darkness, leaving him with an uneasy sense that he had been watched. Over the next 2 years, the lights would return. Always singular, always red. They would appear sporadically, trailing behind his car as he drove the lonely country roads. Months would pass without incident, and then without warning, the light would reappear. At first, the sightings were merely curious, even intriguing, but one encounter changed everything. On a fateful evening at Compton Bay, the very place where Faye's story begins, Mr. Y experienced something that turned his curiosity into fear. That night, he was forced to climb a rock formation to escape what he believed to be an underwater craft. The tidal surge, the glowing yellow lights watching him from beneath the waves, it all echoed the red lights in the sky that had followed him for years. The parallel was undeniable, and it left Mr. Y haunted. The strange lights in the sky, the unnatural activity in the sea, they were too similar to ignore. Yet, despite his fascination with the unexplained, Mr. Y kept his experiences to himself. How could he explain to anyone that glowing lights seemed to stalk him, both in the sky and the ocean, without sounding insane? He had never told Faye about his encounters. Not once had he discussed the lights or his growing interest in UFOs around her. That's why her story about Sam unnerved him so deeply. It wasn't just the bizarre details she shared. It was the uncanny resemblance her encounter bore to the patterns of UFO sightings he had studied. One detail in particular stood out. The 2 workmen who had been nearby while Faye and the boy talked to Sam. According to Faye, they had acted as though they saw nothing, completely oblivious to the strange figure or the children's interactions with him. To Mr. Y, this suggested something far more sinister. "I get the impression," he later said, "that Faye was somehow taken into a bubble of alien reality created by this strange personage. He told them he had just made the hut. Also, Faye told me that while they were talking to this ghost, 2 workmen nearby were repairing a post. They paid no attention to the weird charade, as though they could not see it. Despite his interpretation, neither Faye nor the boy ever suggested that Sam was an alien. To them, he was more like a ghost, something ethereal, something not fully there. But for Mr. Y, the connections were impossible to ignore, and they only deepened his belief that what Faye had experienced was far from ordinary.
There's a lot going on there. So he'd had these experiences for years.
Yep. So what I wanted to do, and I hinted at it in the beginning that all these appearances was happening. It's because I wanted people to see that, it's happened. So his first experience technically happened in 1970.
Right.
And that's also in these journals that I've not included, but they're also in the journals. They're technically they're in the same journal because they did put it all in the same. They put his story and hers kind of combined because in his mind, this is all one and the same. For him, these are UFOs. Right. These circles of lights following us. And it kind of reminds me Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
It does. Actually, I was reminded of, the one where we had the best dispatcher in the world. Yeah. That reminded me of that as well.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. It's kind of weird. Again, when we go back and we think about other episodes and we're like, man, we've already kind of experienced this to a degree. That's, but again, that happened in 1970. In 1972 is when he had the water episode. Right. And then a year later with Faye, she had it in 1973.
Right. How I'm interpreting the water episode now is he just happened to be the wrong place, the wrong time, and he caught it leaving the ocean. Most of the time it had already left it and it would follow him or show up places.
Well, remember, this is what I told you earlier. Sam said, I have another camp. Right. That it goes into the city. This is near that.
So this might be where his other one is. Yeah. But it sounds like he can operate the craft if this guy's seeing him in the sky all the time.
Yes.
Interesting.
So the question is it the same? Is it something different? Are they all interconnected? Yeah. What's going on with it?
It seems like Sam is obsessed with this guy and he finds out that he's got a little daughter and basically talks to her the first chance he gets when she approaches his other camp.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, the other thing, too, that I just realized now, even though we were looking at the picture earlier, is that fence from the drawing was really close to his camp. That means the workmen who are working on the fence were not very far away at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say that, but what I thought was maybe it's all interconnected fence, but maybe it was on a farther end because it said they had to run far enough because he took them to the hut. Right. And they had already passed the workers.
Oh, okay. So it must have been a fence that was like sort of around the swampy area.
Well, it all could have been connected. Like it all could have been all one connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. But the ships that were following him, he did have witnesses that saw this as well.
Yes.
Now, if this was happening to you over time, do you think it would become less scary or more scary?
More.
It happened repeatedly. Me too. Yep. That's what I'm thinking too.
Now, an interesting thing. So for Faye, this happened 1973. Right. 1976, 3 years later, July 30th at 8 o'clock, the crew of British Airways Trident aircraft observed a bright headlamp-like object over the coast of Portugal. Radar sightings unidentified objects shortly after that, suggesting the initial sightings could have been research balloons. And then if you go to 74, very similar things, but with car malfunctioning over Italy. Okay. So again, we talked about this in other episodes too. When there's a surplus in UFO activity, usually you see it all over the place. So prime example, we're talking about in England, right? 2 years later, you've got this extra activity in Italy. You got extra activity now in Portugal. So it's like, was this like a boom of UFO activity? And if that's the case, is that what happened to him? Maybe his spacecraft crashed. His companion died. Now there's all these UFOs coming and going.
Right.
But maybe he's stuck now.
Yeah. I mean, like if he in fact did turn out to be like an assistant robot, he probably can't do intergalactic travel. He can't plan. Maybe he can just fly it back and forth, and maybe he can't contact them. Or, if he can, and they're like, well, you're just not worth coming to get or something.
He's
like
Cogsworth.
Yeah. So
from Fallout 4.
Yeah, they're just not willing.
Yeah. So Cogsworth is, his family died or is missing, and he's spent all that time in the city, and he just stayed there. The city became his home away from home. Same thing. Yep.
But that seems to fit. Everything seems to fit there. And like I said, I think that guy just happened to catch him coming out of his other camp, like we talked about. But he does seem to have an obsession with this guy and his family.
Right. It's very odd. It's very odd, though.
So, how about this? What if? So he'd been following that girl's father around all this time.
Possibly.
Maybe. Yeah. So let's say it was him.
Yeah.
And maybe he knew, and assuming as well that he knew that this was the guy's daughter, which I think he would. And he might have assumed that her father had been telling his family about these experiences. So when he says, you know what I am, he's under the assumption that the father had been telling these experiences to his family. That's what I'm wondering.
I mean, he did say, you know what I am.
Right. So if the father had been telling his experiences, she would have been like, are you the thing that was following my dad?
Right. Exactly.
Right. So, because he might be able to travel around, but he's probably not psychic.
Right.
So he doesn't know.
Correct. Yeah. But it makes you wonder, like, it kind of makes you look at things. But like when I wrote this, what my thoughts is I want to start out at the very beginning. Before the daughter. I don't want to start out with his very beginning. I want to start out with the very beginning of this thing where he's in the water. But what I left out was 2 years previous, he had all these series of events. So for him, he was interconnecting it all. And then when we got to that part, I looked over at Nick and I said, they all interconnect, and he goes full circle. That was the point of doing all that. I wanted, because if I came back and I'm like, we've got this and we've got this and we've got this and we've got, it would have been a UFO from the very beginning. And I didn't want our minds to go straight to UFO.
Right. Some of the best tales are cyclical anyway.
Yes.
Like they're really good. But now I'm also thinking back to our other episode, which will definitely come out before this, the Sudbrick one. Remember how the aliens were calling him, and it was like they were trying to use him to learn.
Yes.
I had proposed that, or one of us had proposed that they were using the phone calls to learn the language.
Right.
Now, remember on this one, he said something to them through the microphone, but only that. And then he made them read his words out loud.
Right.
And I wonder if he was learning more language that way.
I didn't piece that together, but yeah, that's I could see that.
Yeah, my mind's shooting back and forth between all the segments to find correlation, but that is the thing that I could think was happening. Because why would you do that? If you can talk, why wouldn't you talk? Why would you write out words and have them read it back to you? Because the story specifically said he wanted them to read it out loud.
Read it out loud, correct.
Yeah, what other reason? I can't think of.
Well, and he also, on the paper, he had all the words in different places.
Right.
So he was pointing to the words he wanted her to say.
Yeah, so testing out structure as well, sentence structure maybe.
Could be.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting.
Very interesting, yeah. Out of curiosity, have you ever heard of a story like this before?
Not exactly like this, I wouldn't say. Not with an alien that has been described in this way.
Interesting. Let's go to the next segment.
Oh, okay. That was abrupt.
Just a few years after the Sandown incident, reports of UFO sightings swept across parts of Wales, culminating in one of the most famous encounters, the Broadhaven school case. There, on a seemingly ordinary day, children began claiming they had seen a UFO in their school's playing field. Their teachers, skeptical and dismissive, separated the children and asked each to draw what they had seen. Surely they thought the images would vary wildly, exposing the claims as fantasy. But the drawings were eerily consistent. Many of the children's sketches included a figure near the craft. It was described as wearing a green and silver outfit, uncannily similar to the attire Sam was said to have worn. Chillingly, some drawings even depicted the figure with a pointed hat, just like Sam's. So what are we to make of this? The Sandown Clown remains one of the strangest UFO stories ever recorded, and the peculiar details of the encounter have perplexed and fascinated people for decades. On the surface, it could easily be dismissed as the product of an overactive imagination, a child spinning a fanciful tale. But when you consider the layers of the story, the corroboration by Faye's friend, the eerie parallels to Mr. Y's own experiences, it becomes much harder to ignore. Could Mr. Y's prior encounters with strange lights have colored his interpretation of Faye's story, leading him to impose his beliefs onto her account? It's possible. But then again, perhaps the two events were not connected at all. After all, Mr. Y wasn't pursued through the sea by a towering figure with a microphone. And yet, there are threads tying them together, whispers of shared phenomena. Could the wailing sound Faye and her friend heard that day have been the same unearthly drone that haunted Mr. Y years earlier? If Faye's story was invented, why did she wait 3 weeks to share it, only doing so after being dismissed by the first adults she told? Why did her friend, far from seeking attention, seem so reluctant to recount the tale? And why was Sam so evasive, so cryptic when asked about his true nature? What's striking is that the children never referred to Sam as a clown. That label came later, assigned by those who heard the story. The children described him as something else entirely, almost like a wooden marionette. His appearance straddled the line between natural and mechanical. Metallic walls juxtaposed with wooden furniture, ragged clothes paired with antennas made of wood. It was a patchwork of contradictions, blending the mundane with the surreal. Of course, there's a darker interpretation. The stiff, unmoving lips and muffled voice could suggest a man in a mask. The thought of a stranger luring children to a hidden shack in the marshes takes on an undeniably sinister edge. Could he have been a traveling entertainer, a magician of sorts, whose bizarre trick with the berry was meant to fascinate the children? If so, their imaginations may have transformed a strange yet ordinary man into something fantastical. But this theory raises its own questions. If Sam were merely a man in a costume, why did the children who described him with such unsettling precision never suggest he was wearing a mask? And if he were human, what was the purpose of his cryptic answers, his metallic home, his otherworldly mannerisms? Then there's the wilder possibility. Was Sam something else entirely? Could he have taken on the form of a colorful character he believed would appeal to children, a figure reminiscent of a children's TV show? If so, perhaps the facade wasn't quite right. His muffled speech, his stilted movements, even the juxtaposition of cozy wallpaper and cold metal in his home, all might point to a being attempting and failing to imitate humanity. It's worth noting that in 1973, clowns didn't carry the same cultural unease they do today. Was Sam's appearance designed to put the children at ease, to make them feel safe or to lure them into his world? We will never know what truly happened that day. Sam the Sandown Clown remains an enigma, his story a lingering shadow on an otherwise ordinary spring afternoon. Whether a case of misinterpretation, a sinister human encounter, or something far stranger, Sam's tale endures as a chilling reminder of how little we truly understand about the world and what might be lurking just beyond its edges.
So I wanted to give a smorgasbord of different thought processes. And a lot of different variables. But before we get into those, there was another very famous case. And if you listen, the description was eerily familiar.
Yeah. And I feel like I've seen a movie based off of that.
They've had a lot of documentaries on it.
It was probably a documentary because I seem to remember them interviewing people. Was this one where everyone like agreed to it for years and then there was just like one kid that was like, nah, everyone imagined it or something like that?
There was cases, but there was another UFO case that you're referring to also that is similar too. So you could be talking about either one.
Okay. Maybe it is the other one, but it does sound very familiar.
But this one, they all drew almost the same exact guy.
Yeah. That's pretty wild.
But this wasn't one kid or two kids. This was a few kids.
Yeah. And I don't think they had time or would have been organized enough for them to say, okay, this is exactly what we've got to draw if they asked us to draw it. That seems impossible. That's can't get very difficult, a bunch of kids to do anything the same.
Right. Yeah. It's like herding cats, man.
Exactly. And then getting those cats to draw a picture for you.
Right. Yeah. It's virtually impossible.
There is one thing that you brought up in this that I hadn't even considered, which is, I guess, because of the kind of podcast we run, that it was some kind of weirdo trying to lure kids into. But I'll tell you one good reason why I don't think it was a weirdo. Because we would have never heard from those kids.
Probably not. But I did put it in there because that is a theory of some of the people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't see that as being a possibility, but it's a theory. So I want to put it there.
Scarier thing than any of this.
Oh yeah.
That there are people out there like that. And to think that kids might have gone into a weirdo's cabin. That's not like, I don't like to think about that.
There is another thing that I was talking about, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, which was, is this thing just trying to pretend to be a clown?
Right.
And it's just not getting things quite right.
Yeah. It's like it's heard of a clown.
Yeah.
Or maybe it saw a picture of a clown once.
Or we've been beaming our freaking, beams out in outer space for how long? Maybe they got an old television show and that's how they assume.
Yeah,
that we are.
We've been doing that for ages.
Oh yeah.
One of the, I better check this. Hold on. What's the first? Let's see. So. Oh. This is on Real Clear Science. So we've been beaming out things into space for quite some time. And the unfortunate thing is one of the beams that would have traveled the furthest is Nazi Germany's telecast of the 1936 Olympic Games opening ceremony in Berlin, which featured Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
That's what would have went the furthest by now. So the very first thing that, and I just had to double check that because it sounds like a sensational story.
Yeah.
But that would have been, if someone was traveling towards our planet, that would have been the very first thing that they would have heard. Now, luckily for us, they wouldn't know what a horrid person that was and what's going to happen next.
Right.
But that's the first voice that aliens will hear as they're traveling.
Could you imagine though? Because like the best example I can use is like a parrot.
Right.
Like they hear phrases and they just mimic it.
Oh my goodness. And then they arrive here and they're speaking like Adolf Hitler. That would be horrible.
How scary would that be?
That's a bad foot to start off on.
Yes.
When you arrive here.
Yes.
Not good.
It's insane when you think about the entire thing. So really, there's a lot of things that this could have been. We don't really have a rhyme or reason.
No.
What do you think it was though?
So I'm gonna go with what I've sort of been playing with this whole time, is that he is a trapped robot that was working aboard an alien ship, and he has become obsessed with his family, and that anytime someone gets close enough to him, they enter an extra dimensional space. And my last thing I want to say about that is I have talked to many people who have had encounters with UFOs, and they always talk about unnatural silence. Always.
Isn't that always kind of weird?
Mm-hmm. Have you found this to be true too? Like the people you've talked to?
I'm trying to think of a case where that's not been.
Right.
And I can't think of any.
Even ones I've read.
I remember in the
like
early days, I feel like they said that there was a hum, but then the question becomes, is the hum the same thing as like what they initially heard?
Right. Exactly.
And then the other question I would have is, what if for us, there's no hum or no sound because it's not in our dimension, but it's coming into our dimension?
Right.
But what if it's here in our full dimension and we would hear it, or vice versa?
Right.
Like we can't hear their dimension, they can't hear ours. Yeah.
Right. But when you pass into theirs, we'd be able to hear theirs at that point. So
correct.
Yeah. So that would explain a hum like that. But if you're not close enough and you're sort of on the cusp, you probably wouldn't hear either.
Yeah. Unless it's like breaking through. Like it'd have to be breaking through the dimension somehow, like a tear in the fabric as they put it.
Yeah, exactly. Like when he got out of his car that time, like, cause he only mentioned it one time that everything went silent. Like he probably wasn't close enough to hear the ship in their dimension, but he was close enough that he was entering into it.
Right. So. It makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, that's my take on all this.
What do y'all think at home? Do you think this is, I mean, we got a whole bunch. Is it some creep in a mask?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a demon? Do you think it's an extra dimensional robotic being? Do you think it's just an alien? I mean, that's Nick. You could go with what Nick says.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Do you think it's a ghost? The kids referred to it as a ghost.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where I lean on this one. I think I lean closer to what Nick's talking about. But we'd love if you tell us in the comments down below what you think. And also, don't forget, you're going to want to stay around for this song. Trust me.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah.
But hopefully y'all enjoyed this. Please be sure in the comments down below to tell us what you think. Like, tell your friends. Until we see you on the next podcast. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Little guys.
Little guys. Bye-bye, little guys.
His mark with painted face and eyes so wide, out from the woods where secrets hide. Two kids dared to search the grove where whispers told them clowns did rove. Through tangled trees and starlit night, they saw him there in pale moonlight. Sam the clown's a crimson clothes in strange decree. His whispers haunt the shadows deep. Into your dreams he'll slowly creep. With awkward steps and ghastly grin, he played a tune that drew you in. A melody like distant bells that echoed through forsaken dells. Children froze in eerie trance, captured in his lunatic dance. His laughter cold like winter chills, it spiraled through the rolling hills. Then he vanished, gone too soon, leaving just a scarlet balloon. A story shared in hushed lament of Sam the Clown, where sanity